Hello, I'm Peter Behrens. I've spent a lifetime adjusting microphones. Trying to get this one up. Yeah. Is that good? I am old, so I have forgotten a lot. But sometimes things happen to you that you remember. And sometimes things happen that you remember everything. This is one of those remember everything stories. It's Banff in 1980, very cold, clear, sharp, blue day after a week-long blizzard that had snowed and snowed and snowed and left us feeling cabin feverish. We needed to get out. We needed to ski. Though it was probably too cold to ski. I've been worrying about Celsius and Fahrenheit today. I live in the United States and thinking it's about 25 below Celsius. It's cold. But we had been trapped by this blizzard and we needed to get out there. So we did. We loaded our skis onto her little car and we drove out of Banff town to Lake Minnewanka, which is not that far away. Big lake surrounded by big icy lumps of ice mountains that day with that blue sky. And we got on our skis and we started skiing through the woods, these kind of little rolly aspen hills around the lake. And it had snowing for a week, as I say, and the snow is very deep. It was that cold, crystal, kind of light Rocky Mountain snow, but it was very deep. And there was no track or trail for us to follow, so we were just blasting our way through the snow. And we realized after we'd been out there for about 40 minutes, and we were both pretty tough people, that it was too cold to ski. It was getting to our lungs, and we could feel, it inside, and getting hoarse, and it was probably not healthy. So we decided we should go back. And we started skiing back to the car, and we realized that we could make it back there more quickly if we crossed a bit of the lake instead, because the wind had blown down the snow on the lake and packed it firmer, so it looked much easier to travel on than through those deep snowy woods where we were breaking trail. So we started out across the bay in the lake, and we were halfway across that bay, 60 yards from either shore, when I heard her scream. And at the same moment, I looked down and saw the snow around my skis was turning gray. I looked around, and I saw my friend Hillary falling backwards into the lake, into a slurry of icy, mushy snow and water in the middle of the lake, in the middle of the Rockies, surrounded by these mountains that are just like big diamonds glittering there. And I got one ski off rather quickly, and I lay down on the ice, and I tried to reach her with it, but as I was doing that, the ice just gave way below me, and there we both were in this hole in the Rockies. And that was the sort of thing you realized you weren't going to get out of right away. You thought, what you literally thought was, so this is how I die. I had always wondered how it was going to end, and now I know. How strange. But we kept resisting and fighting it. It was very cold, and we couldn't get out of the hole because the ice kept breaking all around us. There was no one for miles around. It wasn't the sort of day anyone would go out on. And we kept going, though. We kept determinedly trying to push our way out, though the cold was seeping into us both. And I could feel my thoughts starting to slow, and the coordination between what my brain wanted my body to do and what my body was actually doing was starting to lag a little bit. But we both were determined people, and we both kept trying really hard, and I could see her face was white, like white, and her hair and her hat, everything was covered with ice. I probably looked the same way. I could hear her breathing. It sounded like a truck with something gone really wrong in it. It was hoarse, and I suppose mine was the same. So we were in there, and we weren't getting out, and it was really cold. And I could feel myself my thinking starting to gel, starting to slow down and congeal. And I know with what was my last coordinated mind-body interchange, I managed to push myself up on some ice, and the ice held, and I flopped over onto it from my belly up, and I kicked. And I got the rest of my body up on the ice. And kind of stuck to it. My clothes were all frozen right away. Turned around, and she managed to get herself over to that part of the ice and was kicking tremendously. I neglected to tell you this, but she went in the water with both her skis on. And she couldn't get them off, so she had, in the water, kicked off her boots and skis. So she got over there to where I'd gotten out, and she was a very strong woman and was kicking and determined. I think I grabbed her by the braid of her hair, and she got herself out. And we just flopped onto the ice like frozen fish in a supermarket. There we were. But we were a long way from anywhere, and we were completely soaked. And then completely hardened, we were turning into icemen. And we were sticking to the ice we were relying on. We started crawling for shore because we were afraid of the ice breaking through. But I realized halfway that if we were not moving more quickly, we were going to die. So we got up and we started running, and we made it to shore, and where we both experienced an enormous surge of adrenaline. It was really, I've never done a lot of drugs, but I've sure felt that adrenaline, and it was something else. And I know Hillary felt it as well. And we realized we had to get back to the car through these hilly, aspeny woods, kind of a Russian taiga landscape. And we didn't really know where the car was. We just started going through the woods. There was no trail. The snow was waist deep on me, deeper on her. I went ahead to try and blast through this trail. I was taller. And she followed, but she had nothing on her feet. Socks that were frozen. And her feet were in tremendous pain. And it was very hard for her to walk. She was a person of tremendous strength who never gave up anything, but she had a lot of difficulty moving. And pain was really vivid for her. And so she was screaming quite a bit just to let out the pain. And I was yelling at her to kind of keep going, which she didn't need me yelling at her. She was going anyway, but we kind of kept together that way. And we got to our car, finally. We went back some days later. I went back some days later, and we'd actually dead reckoned from the point we got out of the lake to the car, straight line through about a mile of woods and hills. We just totally right on it. Got to the car, and then we went through this ridiculous dance of two frozen people locked in their clothes with ice, trying to get the key to a 20-year-old Renault out of somebody's ski jacket, which was impossible to do until we broke the ice on my sweater so my hands, which were sort of not usable, came out. Got her jacket off, hooked it on the Saskatchewan license plate of her car, ripped the jacket open from the inside. The key fell onto the snow. We both scrabbled trying to pick up this key on the snow. We got it, and we were fitting it into the door of this battered little red car when a car came around the road, the only other car we'd seen all day. And it was an old Volvo with skis on the roof rack, and the people in it belonged to the Alpine Club of Canada, which I'm tremendously grateful for because they saw us and they knew who we were and what had happened to us. And they stopped, and they immediately began giving us help. As soon as I was in a position where I felt no longer responsible and could hand over responsibility to someone else, I became very goofy and hypothermic and started saying silly things like, "We're fine. Take us home. We're okay." It's a classic sign of hypothermia is really poor decision making, and I was exhibiting it in all kinds of ways from that moment on. But they didn't pay me any heed. The woman in the front seat took off her clothes and cut off my frozen clothes with a knife, and Hillary was in the back seat trying to get her feet taken care of, but no one was paying much attention to her feet. She was in a lot of pain. I was sitting in the front seat of this Volvo with a naked woman in my arms as we were traveling down Banff Avenue at about 70 miles an hour, heading for it looked like a wild party, but it wasn't. to the Mineral Springs Hospital, where they did a kind of triage on us. And men, particularly tall, thin men, lose their body core temperatures more rapidly than most women do. And I was exhibiting signs of pretty serious hypothermia by then. And just in a silly way, I was talking probably more than anything else. And they left Hillary, I remember, on the linoleum floor just inside the hospital. I remember the pools of water there. And I was on a steel table with a tube down my throat and people lying on top of me, and then hot towels on top of me. And then both of us were lowered separately into this thing. It was like you felt like a chicken going into a vat. It was like a bubbling hot water thing with an electric chair that slowly lowered you down very tortuously. But it was better than being in a lake. So we survived. I'd like to see that little painting now. That's a painting that was done by the young woman, Hillary Johnston, who I was with in this adventure. A few weeks, I believe, after that event. That's her in the hole, and that's me reaching for her. That evening, they let us out of the hospital. We could have stayed if we'd wanted to, but we wanted to get out of there. And we went back to we were both artists at the Banff Center at that time. We went back to our room, and we fell asleep. But in the middle of that night, she woke up in distress. Her skin was on fire, she said. And she was extremely restless and extremely uncomfortable and extremely unhappy. So we went into the bathroom as all we could think of to do. We turned on all the lights in this white bathroom. And we turned on all the shower and the hot water, and the steam came out at us. And we just closed the door. We just sat there for an hour in that bright white light with that steam. I don't think we said anything at all. But that is how we managed to get through the experience. And the end of the story is, we've known each other now for 37, 38 years since we went into that hole. We've seen each other, I believe, twice in that time. We've stayed in touch every year around the time of our incident. We somehow get in touch with each other. We never mention it. We never have mentioned it in all those decades. Tangentially, we might refer to something or make a joke about ice, but we never spoke of the experience until last year, when I believe I started asking Hillary some things about it. And I'm a writer, and I know how stories evolve and change and get messed up over time. We spoke of that tonight. That's what writers do, and that's what people do, and that's how humans work with stories generally. And I had assumed that our story would have done that as well. And the thing that it didn't do, the thing that it stayed like a block of ice, and like those chunks of ice that were that day in those icy mountains that were sort of permanent, our story didn't change at all. The story she remembered was exactly down to its details, and ripping the jacket open on the Saskatchewan license plate. She remembered exactly the same things I did. So some stories aren't really stories, they're just like etchings. And they're not literary narratives, they're just, I guess, things that just stay there. Anyway, that's mine. Thank you for listening.